those of you joining in over on YouTube, going live here on TikTok. Waiting for people to come in the room, obviously. I have talked to TJ the Plumber. He will not be in tonight. He is busy. He is currently recording the Rational Boomer podcast. Not sure which day that's going to air. So, I'm on my own. We're going to see what happens. Welcome to those of you just joining in, just getting started. We're going to be talking news and politics tonight. Got some things we can talk about. Over 100 Democratic members of Congress have sent a letter to Joe Biden asking him to certify the potential 28th Amendment to the Constitution. That's kind of interesting, the Equal Rights Amendment. From the way I understand it, Equal Rights Amendment was passed in 72. And they had a 7-year time limit as to whether for its ratification. Now, before that 7-year time limit was up, Congress passed something else that Jimmy Carter signed, extending that deadline. And now we do have 38 states having ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. That happened 4 years ago, and it just hasn't been added to the Constitution. So these over 100 Democratic members of Congress have sent a letter to President Biden instructing him to basically instruct the National Archives to add it to the Constitution, which would lead to all kinds of constitutional issues, multiple lawsuits, probably end up before the Supreme Court. But it is interesting that we could potentially have another amendment to the Constitution here shortly. Now, because of the time frame with that amendment, a lot of people are thinking the only way to actually pass the Equal Rights Amendment would be for them to just scrap it, start over, repass it through both chambers of Congress, and send it back to the states for re-ratification, and go from there. Now, whether that would work or not is anybody's guess. I don't know if you could get 67% of both chambers of Congress right now to agree on ratification of an Equal Rights Amendment. So it could be up in the air. No idea what could happen there. But I just find it interesting that we have, now that we're down to the wire, we are just over a month away from inauguration. They're putting pressure on Joe Biden to do this, to certify the Equal Rights Amendment. Where was the pressure during the first half of his term? Why didn't they pass something through Congress trying to again extend that deadline, even though it had already passed, and clarifying it potentially? So we'll see if anything happens here. I think this is just a case of I think the timeline limit is probably up on the Equal Rights Amendment, just saying, because they originally said must be ratified within 7 years. And then an entirely different Congress 5 years later was the one that tried to extend the deadline. And it took them almost 50 years to get 38 states to ratify. So I don't know if he'll be able to just instruct. Christine says, did you know Roe was represented by a Republican lawyer? No, I didn't, but I'm not surprised. Because originally, when Roe passed, it was, if you're talking about the original Roe case, when that case came up, even after it was settled, for a while, it was fine. Even Republicans, conservatives, some of the churches, including the Southern Baptist Church congregations, their association, whatever it's called, were in support of Roe. And then when that happened, then after a while they realized, we can, radicalize this and we can start changing the tone on it. And the reason they got the churches and everybody against it was seated in racism. They realized that if everyone had access to abortions, white people would be getting more abortions, and they would somehow eventually end up being the minority of the population. That's where it started. Initially, everybody liked the Roe decision, including churches, including a lot of religions. So it being represented by a Republican doesn't surprise me at all. And Bales is right. Yeah. Um, that's one of those things that I find interesting. There's been a lot of policy shifts over the years when it comes to the different parties. One side will be in favor of it, or both parties will be in favor of it, until the right person, the right politician comes along, and then suddenly um, their position is completely switched. But no, Roe was definitely supported by both sides of the aisle for a while until they realized they could get the Christian voting bloc solidly behind Republicans on this issue. And then for the longest time, I don't think there were some Republicans that actually wanted to overturn Roe, but I don't think as many of them wanted to overturn it as they wanted to constantly run on overturning it and fundraise off of overturning it because they assumed the Supreme Court would never touch it, it'd be safe, so they could throw it out there like, uh, your kid running for class president in high school saying, I'm going to put, vending machines in every classroom. Knows it can't get done, but he says it because people like it. Christine says, I left the Catholic Church. They put the pro-life position into full gear. They were one of them, but they also were initially on the side of Roe v. Wade. Um, and then they changed their stance later. Um, and they really pushed. I used to be a Catholic as well. Um, it is. I've heard all of that rhetoric. I know. I know where they come from that, and it's not a good place. That's part of where people get the misconception of, like, I think that in textbooks. M. Bill says, I'm Catholic and voted for Harris. Yeah, my parents both Catholic, and they voted for Harris. They couldn't bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump. But previously, they kept voting for Trump because of overturning Roe. They voted for Mitt Romney because of Roe, because they didn't believe Barack Obama was actually a Christian. Priests got children. Yeah, I know a few stories of that just from my own life. Nothing happened to me or anybody I'm uh, still friends with. I know the sister of one of my friends when I was very young, who I haven't seen in 30 years. Apparently, something happened, and when the story came out, the only thing that happened was the priest got moved to a parish without a school. Um, and they said, everybody in the parish and stuff, well, he's such a good priest. I couldn't see him doing anything like that. They believed the priest over the girl, and they moved him to a different district, to a different parish without a school, an older community where, there were less children, but instead of doing anything, they covered it up and they buried it. And that was typical of the Catholic Church. Yeah, I really don't think Republicans wanted to overturn Roe as much as they wanted to run on the overturning of Roe. And I really thought the overturning of Roe was going to be a bigger factor in this election. One of the things that has baffled me this entire election cycle and going through the results of election night this year, Missouri. Missouri passes the abortion amendment for their state constitution with, like, it was 53 or 56% of the vote passing it. But they voted for Donald Trump, the person that made it necessary for them to put the abortion amendment into their constitution. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Let's see. Deegan says, where do you think J.D. Vance is right now, and if he was really visited by the FBI? fake news. Haven't heard anything about him being visited by the FBI outside of some comments on some videos. Um, JD Vance, who knows? He's this is what you're going to see out of JD Vance until it becomes time for him to uh, uh, end up being president, whether it's through something physically happening to Donald Trump and he passes because he's not in the best of health. Um, Something happens, they 25th Amendment him, or they impeach and remove him. Then we'll see JD Vance, but he's going to be hiding. Slick Mick says Trump overturned Roe v. Wade? Question mark. Yes, he did. He brags about it because he put 3 of the justices on the Supreme Court with the help of Senate Republicans to confirm well, I'm not going anywhere, Jose, but you can go away. Um, but yes, Donald Trump did overturn Roe v. Wade because he put the justices in place to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, those weren't his picks. He had no idea who those people were. I almost guarantee it. Somebody handed him a piece of paper, said, "Say this name," patted him on the back, said, they'll think you're a genius for doing this." Told him a couple of talking points, and that was that. Well, Jay, I won't cry you a river, but I will send you up the river. Now, I don't have my moderator tonight. I know he's busy. Keto says America is going to be an oligarchy in 4 years. Agree. No. No, it won't be. They don't have the powers to change enough stuff. They can barely agree with themselves. They are going to be lucky enough to get anything accomplished. It's going to be a joke for 4 years, but they're not going to get anything done. Laddie's back in. See them quite frequently. James says, isn't there some Trump cabinet nominees that are now getting approved that were originally told no? No. I'm hearing some are getting a little more consideration by some senators than they previously were. I know Joni Ernst, the junior senator from Iowa here, she was a hard no against Pete Hegseth, and then there's been some reports of Republicans saying if you don't vote for all of Donald Trump's picks, we're going to primary you. Elon saying he's going to throw a ridiculous amount of money primarying out a bunch of these people who are up for election. And then there was also talks about Republicans doing private investigations on these senators and stuff and trying to just make their lives miserable. So what she said was, well, I'm not going to say no right now. I want to see what he says and how he answers the questions in the confirmation hearing. And if the witnesses come forward and are actually credible, or they're at least coming forward with people, then I'll listen to them. If it's just, a news report and some nameless person, then no. So there's a little bit, but they're just saying what they have to get these people off their backs. Keto says Elon Musk scares me. Elon won't be around long. He's going to get into a pissing contest with Donald Trump. They're the same personality. Once Elon's taken too much of the spotlight from Trump, Trump's going to get pissed and kick him to the curb. Pancake says Trump's cabinet picks are terrible. They are. They are completely terrible. A number of them will get confirmed, but I think the worst ones won't. I don't think RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth. Not even sure if Linda McMahon gets through. A bunch of them just won't be. Keto Powers says Speaker of the House seems reasonable compared to Rick Scott. Not really. He's still a clown. He's just a more charismatic clown. Deegan says, "Why do you think people are saying there's something going on behind the scenes about the vote?" Um, I think some of it's hope. They're hoping something could happen, that because everything looks so weird, that they're looking for anything. Until I see something that is more evidence based, I just don't think anything is anything gonna come of it. It's until we see something. I don't want to get roped into the same thought process as we dealt with coming out of them with 2020. Christine says, "How well do you think Democrat candidates in the special house? I'm guessing you mean the special house elections go. Special elections get weird. They're on a weird day. They're going to be spaced out between here and I think April at least. You don't have an incumbent because a lot of people will go into the voting booth and vote for the name they recognize. And a lot of times it's the person who has been in that seat for a long time. I know that's why one of the reasons why Chuck Grassley here in Iowa, the senator who is 91 years old, keeps getting reelected. It's because he's been there as long as I've been alive plus. So incumbency helps, and you don't have that in a special election. There's also money. I don't know what the Democrats have left, but they had more money going into the election than Republicans, so they could maybe shift some stuff around and help with the special elections. So I'm going to be watching them. It's going to be interesting. Bass player says, "I like listening to civil and factual conversations. You are that. Well, thank you." Races. Christine says, races next year. I'm talking about the special elections. Well, Zim says, "Good God, who cares?" Well, then you can go somewhere else and find something else you care about. James Hughes says, "What's the target date that Trump's cabinet nominees have to be decided and installed by?" I don't think there is one. I don't think there actually is a date. Um, the only time there's a deadline, as far as I know, maybe I'm forgetting something, is if Donald Trump were to get the power to do a recess appointment, which would take both chambers of Congress agreeing to be gone for longer than like 10 days, he could appoint somebody. And then when the Senate comes back, they would have until January 3rd of 27 or January 3rd of 29 if that happened after January 3rd of 27 to approve the person or say, no, we don't approve, and the person gets kicked out. So, yeah, there's no deadline as far as I know. M. Bailey says, "Trump already kicked Elon Musk to the curb. What's Doge?" Well, Doge doesn't exist. It is the Department of Government Efficiency. This is this idea they have for a government entity to help cut costs and cut spending, but it doesn't exist. It would take Congress to approve its existence. They're basically outside advisors. They have no power, no authority, and Congress doesn't have to listen to them. Some of them will, like your Marjorie Taylor Greens, are going to be working with them. But for the most part, they're going to tell them to go get lost. Katrina says, "Are we going to lose the DOE? What are the odds? Do they have the votes?" I'm going to say more than likely not. Here's the thing. Department of Education is one of those departments. It's going to take Congress. They have slim majorities in Congress, and I think Democrats can filibuster getting rid of the department. So it's not going to go away. They may be able to do some stuff with what they approve and this and that, but I just don't think they have the votes to get rid of it. Beyond that, even if the Democrats, even if the filibuster isn't going to be a thing, Republicans have to go back to their states and get elected in 2 years. And how are they going to go back to their states and say, hey, we got rid of the Department of Education, re-elect us? It's going to be a struggle for them. Deegan says, why are the Republicans so quiet about what's going on? I don't know. Christine says, I think Republicans cheated. They threw away and burned ballots. That would be the best way to keep hands clean. Yeah. They might have. I just wish there was some kind of evidence that that happened. How many votes do they need to get rid of the Department of Education? Well, all they need is a majority in the House of Representatives, which is 218. They have 220 seats. 3 no votes and it fails. So I just don't know if they have all of the Republicans in the House willing to back getting rid of the Department of Education. And they can only lose 3 votes. In the Senate, to get around the filibuster, they would need 60 votes. They have 53. So they would need 7 Democrats to cross party lines to get it past the filibuster, and I just don't see them doing that. Mike says they are willing to break every law there is because the Dems have not been able to prosecute them. Yeah, Merrick Garland sat on his hands for 2 years, didn't want to appear political by going after Donald Trump or any sitting Republicans when it came to January 6th. He wanted to do what they did it with Watergate, and that was basically, let's just do a pardon, sweep it under the rug, and ignore it. Yeah, he really let us down. And if I was Joe Biden, after the January 6th committee report came out, and he finally announced that he was appointing a special counsel and we find out he just started the investigation, I would have fired Merrick Garland. I wouldn't have cared. That's just me. Richard said Republicans don't really give a shit. It's the president's job from now on for the next 4 years. Yeah, but there's only so much the president can do. They need Congress, and they have to get reelected. Donald Trump is ineligible to run ever again. So they don't need him. He needs them, and they have to get reelected. So if they go with too much of this stuff and they start thinking it's going to hurt their chances, same with some of his policies. If it starts to tank the economy and they're feeling like it's going to hurt them getting reelected, then they're gonna break with him because they know they have to get reelected. James says, did you happen to hear Trump's now saying he will not be able to bring down grocery prices? Yeah. Yeah, he said that in his Time magazine interview for him being named Person of the Year. That it's going to be hard to bring down grocery prices, which is what we've been saying. Problem is, the Republican voters, the MAGA voters, even when he says it out of his own mouth, they won't believe it. Because they're too busy in the delusion and thinking about what he's going to do that they won't believe it till it bites them in the ass and prices go up. Deegan says, will or can Trump really use the military and the Guard to carry out the deportation? Not really. Yes, he's got full power of the military to do the deportation, but one of the things is all the military take an oath to the Constitution, not the president. And they will follow out any lawful order. Rounding up U.S. citizens is not a lawful order. Turning your weapons on American citizens, not a lawful order. And as far as the National Guard, he cannot just nationalize any Guard unit he chooses except for D.C. He would still need governors of certain states to authorize the Guard for him to use. Now, some Republican states may do this, but it wouldn't be every Guard unit. And it comes down to optics. It comes down to funding. If Republicans think him sending the Guard through city by city, rounding up people to be deported, is going to hurt them in elections, they will break with him and they will vote to impeach him. They're going to have to. They're going to leave him no choice but to push for it, or they will work out a backroom deal with J.D. Vance, where J.D. Vance uses the 25th and says, "Look, this man's off his rocker. He's unfit to be president," and then Congress just has to agree, and Donald Trump is out. J.D. Vance is in. So either way, I think he's going to leave him no choice if he tries to do it. I just don't know what actual authority he's got in there to make it happen. Laurel says, let's see, where did that go? It scrolled on me here. Between listening to you and Boomer, I think I deserve college credits. Love you guys. Well, thank you. Richard says, why do you guys believe the Republicans want to get rid of the Department of Education? Well, because they've said as much. Eugene says, thank God for checks and balances. Yes. The checks and balances are going to have to hold. And they will, to an extent. I did a TikTok on it earlier. I think TikTok's hiding some of my videos. The Ten Commandments law in Louisiana. Court said unconstitutional. And we're going to see more of that as they try to do some of this stuff. The court's going to step in and stop a chunk of it. Mike says too late now and it's bad. And it's not as bad as it could be. And, you know, they don't have the House by very many seats. They don't have a supermajority in the Senate. So there are checks and there's already safeguards in Congress that the Democrats can use. And we just have to do and play politics the way they've been playing politics for the last 18 years since 16 years since 2008, since Barack Obama won. Manti Python says Mitch McConnell needs to go as well. Yeah, and and MAGA's been pushing for Mitch to go. And if Mitch goes, Andy Beshear, the Democratic governor of Kentucky, gets to appoint his replacement. Now, the Kentucky legislature tried passing a law requiring the governor to pick somebody that was of the same party as say Mitch McConnell, as well as from a list of names that the legislature would give him. And he said the Constitution of Kentucky says I get to pick who it is, and that's what I'm going to do. If there is an opening, you'll have to sue me to stop me. So it'd set up one hell of a fight, and I'm waiting for it. Fugly Duckling says Garland was a placeholder who did nothing but the bare minimum. I agree. Get rid of that one. I don't have a moderator tonight. He's busy. Katrina says majority is 217 to 215. Can Dems flip the House? 2 are leaving and Matt Gaetz resigned. Well, the 2 you were talking about, or the 3 there that you were talking about, those are the 3 open seats that would make it 220 to 215 if they weren't open. So, yeah. It is possible. If Democrats were to win all 3 seats, they would have the majority in the House by 1 vote. And with already the backlash being seen to Donald Trump, to his policies, just with what we're hearing about people saying, can I change my vote? What's a tariff? Things like that. It is entirely possible that the special elections could go all Democrat. It's weird. Yes, I know some of them are safe red districts, but you never know with special elections. And now, like I said, with everything going on with the backlash against Trump, that they could flip them. Fugly Duckling says Garland is responsible for putting Trump in the presidency just like Comey did. Kind of. Didn't I block you? Yes. Already gone. Okay. Joel says, I'm concerned about the local media obeying in advance, paying millions to loyalty. Um, yeah, they're paying in advance just because it's going to be easier. Um, and that's a bad thing. But we'll actually see what they really do and how they cover him afterward. Mike says Canada is bringing down grocery prices. Trump would never do that. He's in the pocket. Yeah. I'm going to admit it. I miss having TJ here tonight. Um, dog hair. Manti says, how can Trump do anything when he's not president yet? Most of what he's doing is talking. And there's always been kind of a thing when you're in the transition where normally it would be working with both administrations, but yeah. He's kind of doing his own thing. You're already gone. Not gonna lie, I do miss TJ. He does a great job of keeping the chat safe. Fugly Ducking says, I'm concerned about the local media obeying in advance. Yeah. We talked about that. Mike says, no way Trump will finish 4 years. JD Vance is there to sneak in the back door. Yeah. I don't think he survives 4 years. Either his health gets him and he doesn't live through 4 years, or he gets impeached and removed or 25th. I don't think, and I said the same thing about Joe Biden as far as his health 4 years ago when Joe Biden became president. I was concerned he wouldn't live 4 years. I said it's possible. I'm going to say the same thing about Donald Trump. He is 78 years old. He is in not great health. It is possible his health doesn't let him make it that full time. Beyond there, if his policies are hurting Republicans and they're worried about getting elected, it's not about whether it hurts the country, it's whether it hurts their chance to get reelected, then they would remove him. Laurel says, if Trump is removed, will the sentencing be done? Entirely possible. Katrina says, do you think Trump will make himself a dictator? Do you think in 4 years he won't leave? No and no. He might try. Problem is, they don't have the votes to change the Constitution, so they have to go by what the Constitution says. And even if they did it, changing a constitutional amendment is a slow process. I did a video earlier talking about the Equal Rights Amendment. It took them almost 50 years to get enough states to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And it's still not part of the Constitution. There's a whole issue with that. I'll talk about that later, maybe when I get caught back up with the chat. So they can't change the Constitution. And Congress knows they have to get reelected because they can't change the Constitution. So he's not going to be able to get as much power as he wants. And then in 4 years, if he's still alive and if he hasn't been impeached and removed or 25th Amendmented, or even if he does, even if they impeach and remove him day 2 of his administration, it doesn't matter. Whatever that happens, or come 12 noon January 20th, 2029, whoever the new incoming president is, whether that's J.D. Vance because they removed him, or whoever won the next election, the minute they hold up their hand and finish the oath, they are president with full powers of everything. Donald Trump can't do anything, and it doesn't matter where you take the oath of office. Famously, LBJ took the oath of office in Air Force One, flying back to D.C. from Dallas with the president's body in the plane. Like, he hadn't even been dead that long. They're on the plane. He got a local judge to fly with him, and he took the oath of office. It doesn't even have to be a Supreme Court judge. So, yeah, there's no way he can just stay. The next person will just take the oath, have all the authority. Mike says they have the Supreme Court. They do, but even this Supreme Court is going to have to draw lines somewhere. M. Bale says, your live is educational, gives me hope. Thank you. Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you're getting something out of it. Mike says, Mitch needs to go if they are going to complete the overthrow. Yeah, Mitch McConnell being there is going to be a roadblock. And the thing is, if Mitch McConnell would have done the right thing during either impeachment and voted to remove him then, we wouldn't be having this discussion now. For Mitch McConnell, it's great, but it's also a little too late. Too little, too late. He should have done something sooner. Deegan says, will Mr. Raskin's constitutional argument of the 14th to kick out Trump work? I don't know. I don't know. I haven't heard actually where he's making this argument. I've been hearing a lot of people talk about it, that he's doing it, but I just haven't seen which court case, in front of what judge, or how he's making the 14th Amendment argument, other than just people talking about it. So, we'll see. Let's see. The 2020 election was close by thin margins in three key states: Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. It was very thin. James says, do you think Biden's recent and upcoming pardons will be too extensive? Doesn't matter. President has absolute pardon power. Let's see. Mike says they are willing to do the worst things imaginable to stay out of jail. Yeah, they are. Katrina says, Elise Stefanik represents a red district. True. Since I don't have my moderator here tonight, I'm handling a little bit of my moderation myself. Let's see. Bass player says it's amazing that people didn't understand what tariffs are. A lot of them still don't. They still don't. Big G says your lives are thoughtful. Thank you. Mike says, has anyone looked into the Heritage Foundation? Biden is warning them all of a sudden. I haven't heard that Biden's warning the Heritage Foundation, so I don't know what you're talking about there. Battery says, at what age did you start losing your hair? For my brother, it was high school. I've had this hairline since I was 19. Fugly Duckling says he's already sundowning. He's existing on uppers. Yeah, that's obvious. That explains why he's awake at 2 a.m. And that's why his advisors aren't hearing about policies ahead of time. He's just awake at 2, 3 in the morning, 4 a.m., whatever. And he's throwing shit out there and saying, we're going to do this. And he's not talking to anybody about it ahead of time. That's part of his sundowning. It's part of the dementia. He's already had cognitive tests. And from the tests he's described, the way I understand them is they are the type of tests you give to people who have had strokes, who have had risk sign for dementia, etc. So, yeah. Covered that already. Jules says, Fugly Duckling says, I agree. He's keeping the 25th at bay with loyalist toadies, kind of. Um, yeah, but again, if things look bad enough, JD Vance can. They're only loyal to Trump as long as they think it's beneficial to them. If JD Vance can convince those same people in the cabinet that being loyal to him temporarily to use the 25th is more beneficial, it'll work too. Yeah. Says, says your lives are so helpful and educational. Well, thank you. Um, Jules says our only hope is that Congress will stand up for the Constitution. Um, yeah, it is, and they're not. It's not so much that they're going to stand up for the Constitution. It's going to end up being that they do. Um, they're standing up for their own power, and the side benefit is they're standing up for the Constitution. We are stuck with Trump temporarily. Like I said, there's a good chance they go against him and kick him out. TKS Daddy says, I'm wondering if they will be in shape to take it up on January 3rd, especially if Johnson is thrown away. Oh, yeah. If they there's a good chance they could end up um, voting out uh, their own, like the speaker, and they would have to get a new speaker. Um, Bass player says, "Who do you think has the charisma to take Donald Trump's place and move the agenda forward?" No one. They don't have anybody to take over that leadership role. Um, Maybe JD Vance, only if nothing happens through Trump's administration and he doesn't crash the economy or anything like that. If they have to 25th Amendment him and JD Vance helps to kick Trump out of office, he will never get elected by MAGA. They'll treat him worse than they did Mike Pence. Um, Maybe if something happened to Trump and he dies and JD Vance takes over unwillingly, maybe he can capture that, but they're going to be struggling to. Didn't I block you? Yeah, okay. You sent that ahead of time. James says, will all of Biden's pardons change his legacy? No, I don't think so. Yeah, you can go away too. Doug says Trump is going to learn a big lesson from Doug Ford in Ontario. Doug Ford isn't playing head games. Yeah, he's not. He said, hey, you put tariffs on us, the power coming across the border from Canada, gone, and we're not sending you any oil. And that's the problem with tariffs in a trade war. It's a pissing contest, and nobody wins, everybody loses. Donald Trump should have learned this the first time. TKS Daddy says Trump sure doesn't F in stats, almost as bad as his D plus in English. Yeah, that's because he speaks and talks at a third grade level. Deegan says, don't you think Biden should pardon all the lesser crime criminals? No idea. I don't know if you're talking about everybody who's committed a lesser crime or just specific ones. Wade the Blade says, the beginning of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ben Stein explains why tariffs don't work. Exactly. We've been going through that. Um, Tariffs were part of, not the only cause, but part of the reason it ended up so bad in the Great Depression. Yeah, I already blocked you. Mike says he is warning about the Heritage Foundation. Do your homework. Their effort has been long. Oh, I know the Heritage Foundation's been around for a long time. I just hadn't heard that he was warning about them. TKS Daddy says, in one set of testing while he was at New York Military Academy, Trump read as a 73 IQ. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. He reads and speaks at about a sixth grade level. Yeah, you're already gone. Trump was dragging one of his legs. You've seen it a couple of times. Could be. That's a sign of potentially of the effect of a stroke. Fugly Duckling says, "Yep, just responding to BS because he doesn't have the cognitive capabilities to create policy." Yeah, that's the thing. Like he's very reactionary, and that's why he's reacting at like the odd times that he is, middle of the night and stuff. And when something pops up, that's when he talks about it. And then usually, like, it's when the next shiny object catches his attention. That's when he shifts his focus. Let's see. Wade says the only one JD Couch effer. Yeah. There's a lot of people saying that that's the ultimate plan. TKS Daddy says it might be close enough that one Republican could declare himself a Democrat. Entirely possible. Wouldn't be the first time somebody's switched parties and changed the balance in a congressional chamber. And if things get far enough crazy, one or two Republicans switching allegiances could be enough to do it. Will all of Biden's pardons change his legacy? I don't think so. What is Elon Musk's role? Let's see, getting rid of that one. Musk's role is an outside advisor right now. He doesn't have an official capacity. He is supposed to be helping find ways government can be more efficient and cut costs. The problem is the stuff they're looking at cutting isn't going to actually cut anything, because it's going to cut spending, but it's going to hurt people, like cutting Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security benefits, cutting food stamps, any sort of welfare. They want to try to deem that all as waste, forcing employees to go back in the office. I said this in one, I think it was a TikTok and a live. If they were really about efficiency and the work's still getting done working remote, wouldn't they just quit paying the lease and sell the building and not have the office building anymore? That would be a better way to be efficient. But the idea is that they can get anybody who doesn't want to come back into the office off the payroll and fire them, and that's their way of being efficient while shifting work around. It's a dumb idea by dumb people. Katrina says he'll be worse than Trump. If you're talking about Vance, maybe. But Vance at least is smart enough to know he's not the smartest person in the room, and at least listen to some advisors. He may be dumb. He jumped on the Trump train and the crazy stuff. He went all in, but I think it's all an act. I don't think he believes 90% of it. Katrina says, Doug Ford about to turn out the lights. Yeah, we talked about that. And it's going to be the find out stage. And unfortunately, a bunch of us are going to have to find out with him. TKS Daddy says most U.S. oil technically is from Canada. Yeah, it's like we got like 60% of our oil from Canada. I think actually we import like 60% of all the oil we refine from Canada, refine it, and then we sell it back to them, and we make a lot of money for the United States. Well, for United States businesses, and doing things that would hurt relations from Canada is dumb. The other side of it is we had NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that was signed by Clinton, which said we wouldn't put tariffs on Mexico or Canada and vice versa. Everybody could trade with everybody, no big deal. Well, Donald Trump comes in, says, worst deal we've ever made. Renegotiates. He changes a couple small things in there. That doesn't amount to really changing anything. Calls it something new. He basically renegotiated NAFTA, and now it's the greatest treaty ever signed. So in order to put those tariffs on, he's going to have to go back on a treaty he himself signed, which is kind of dumb. Fugly Duckling says, do you think we will ever get to a place where Pete Buttigieg could be POTUS? He's my hero. I hate thinking like this, but it's entirely possible we could get Pete Buttigieg as president before we could get a woman as president. I think that would be easier to accomplish. And yeah, I'm not trying to say like I voted for Kamala. I thought Kamala was great. And I hate to say that this country is going to be like that, but I think it might actually be entirely possible to elect a gay man before a woman. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but that would be interesting to see. Trevor says, isn't Elon actually an illegal immigrant? Yeah, there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that. A little thought of him being a legal immigrant. Like, he said he was coming for one I think he was coming to be a student, then he went straight to work or something. So yeah, and then he got his citizenship. So yeah, yeah, I already blocked you. TKS Daddy says 90% of natural gas is U.S. made. Check the percentage of U.S. oil that's Canadian produced. Yeah. Hang on, I'm getting rid of this guy here. I'm way behind in the chat. Way behind. I'm catching up though. Yeah, I already blocked JF Milos, but asked if the government used tariffs to fund the government. We did up until the creation of a national income tax. But since the creation of income tax, the government and what it has done has grown drastically. We couldn't have funded everything we expect the government to do now on tariffs alone, especially if they did it all back then. Different time, you're comparing apples and oranges. TKS Daddy says closest to that was 1890 and only Rockefeller did well. Yeah, only the rich people made money. So we have a good chance with the couch fucker as president. Well, we have a good chance for him to be president, and we have a better chance for him to at least listen to some shit and maybe be able to, not wreck the economy. TKS Daddy says Doge is a non-existent agency. And the Government Office of Accountability already exists. Yeah, that's the thing. The Department of Government Accountability is already there. This is them doing something. Basically, they're finding a solution for a problem that already has a solution. Katrina says MTG is from a deeply red district. She is never going away. Yeah. She is. She might go away. Maybe we'll get lucky and she'll actually get appointed to a cabinet position. Let's see. Somebody says Pete is awesome, talking about Pete Buttigieg. Yes, he is. TKS study says Elon began as a student, overstayed, and then, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, he came from South Africa on a student visa and never went to school. Let's see. Getting rid of this guy here, but I am definitely against the tariffs. If Couchfucker has a terrible economy, he will not win in 28, especially since he's a nobody. Yeah. And that's the thing. It also depends on how he becomes president, right? If Donald Trump dies, J.D. Vance may have a chance at capturing the MAGA vote. If Donald Trump is impeached, depending on where J.D. Vance sits as far as the impeachment and what he says about it, he could not have, like, it could sink his chances. If J.D. Vance has to invoke the 25th to remove Trump, he's done. MAGA will never vote for him. But yeah, if he has a horrible economy, especially one he didn't inherit, like if his own actions make it even worse than under Trump, he's dead in the water for 2028. And that's the thing. I think Democrats win in 28. I think they take Congress back in 26. And as long as they actually do something, which for modern Democrats is saying something because they like to sit on their hands and do nothing. If the Democrats actually do something, they could be in power for a while. Problem is they have to actually do something. Their biggest thing is they talk a lot. They also don't hype up their own achievements. And then when it comes time for them to get reelected, they want their achievements, whatever they are, to stand on their own. Well, you got to brag about yourself a little bit, for one. And two, they just need to do something. Right after the immunity ruling from the Supreme Court, the Senate introduced the No Kings Act. And they were going to try to reverse the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity and saying it was never a thing. What did they do with it? They said, hey, we got this bill. It's going to be great. It's going to reverse the presidential immunity decision. And then that's as far as it ever went. It was never brought up for an actual vote. And that's half their problem is they don't do, they do some, but they do a lot of talking for other things. And they're like, well, we'll kick the can down the road. We'll wait till after November when we have full control. And they assumed they were going to win the presidency, have both chambers of Congress, and they could just easily pass it. And then they turn around, and now they lost it all. So now the No Kings Act is dead in the water for at least 4 years. Let's see. Fugly Ducking says, are there only white men in charge of all the new committees under Trump? Are you talking about cabinet positions? No. But it's not great. Matt says history will not be kind to Mr. Garland. No, it won't be. Merrick Garland failed. I said it earlier in the live, if I was Joe Biden and I went ahead and said or found out that Merrick Garland 2 years in hadn't even started to really investigate Donald Trump or sitting members of Congress for J6th, I would have fired his ass. But no, he sat on his hands, didn't want to appear political, played old school politics. And Joe Biden, being an old school politician, didn't do anything about it. Kicking the can down the road got Roe overturned. Yes, it did. They kept saying that they kept saying we'll have to get to it later. We'll get to it later. It's never getting overturned. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And then they just didn't do anything. They could have codified Roe at varying points, and they chose not to. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, the No Kings Act was one they were going to try to pass. Would have reversed the Supreme Court decision on the immunity thing. And yes, I know there are no kings in the United States, but that was the point of the act, was to say, beyond that there's no immunity, there was language in there that said sitting presidents could be charged and arrested and stuff. That they should have been out there hammering that vote home and holding votes and trying to get it passed, and they didn't do a thing with it. They said, we got this bill, and then did nothing. Greg says big change is going to happen. What big changes? By who? How? What are you talking about? Carmen says 2025 full surprises. What do you think is going to happen? Would love to hear more. Greg says you don't think so. I just want to know what you're talking about. What big changes? Which direction are you talking? Big changes. Bass player says Supreme Court, who's retiring? So far, haven't heard anybody. Now, there's a lot of speculation in the next 4 years. You could see Thomas Alito, maybe John Roberts, and if something happens to her health, Sotomayor, all being off the bench, and Donald Trump getting to pick at least 4 nominees. This is what I want to say to Democrats. If I'm right, and in 2 years they regain the House and the Senate, pull a Mitch McConnell. Don't just agree to hold votes on Senate nominees if you have the Senate and Trump wants to be in. Pull a Mitch McConnell. Leave the seats vacant. Refuse to hold any votes. You know, Mitch McConnell in 2016 kept a Supreme Court seat open from February till the following January. Nikki says one of Obama's biggest career mistakes is letting McConnell block seating Garland. Unfortunately, you might think it's a mistake. He didn't have any power to change it. Mitch McConnell, as Senate Majority Leader, had the full authority to do anything. He couldn't force him to do anything. Now, I think, over on my YouTube page, I've got a list of what I call government answers, and I talk about different things about how the government works. And I've got a list in there of 10 things I would change to the Constitution, given the chance. And one of the things I put in there as an amendment, what I would like to see is a time limit. I think I said, and it was a two-way time limit. 180 days before a general election, no Supreme Court nominee can be made by a sitting president. Period. That it was one time limit, just straight a cutoff date. Okay, no more Supreme Court nominees by the sitting president. But then I also said in this idea of just mine of how they would change the Constitution, there should also be a deadline for Congress. And I also said 180 days. Or whatever it is. Yeah, 180 days, 6 months. Okay? So if January 1, Joe Biden gives Congress a nominee for Supreme Court, 180 days go by. That put us at what? July 1st? Come July 1st, if they haven't done anything and they haven't if they haven't held a vote, inaction is considered confirmation. That's what I would do. But that's just me. Eddie West says Mitch doesn't even know who he is now. Yeah, he's going through some health issues, but that's the problem. We've got too many old people in Congress now. There needs to be a combination of term limits and age limits, both. And it should work out to where they're about the same. Now, if TJ, my moderator, would have been here tonight, he would have said age limits solely because experience matters, and he's right. But there definitely needs to be some kind of a limit. And I complain about him all the time. Our senator here, Chuck Grassley, senator from Iowa, he is 91 years old. Born in 1933, the first printed chocolate chip cookie recipe was in 1938. Chuck Grassley turned 18 in the 50s. Okay? He is still a senator at 91, doesn't get up for re-election until 2028. He will be 95 years old and has filed the paperwork to run again. Fugly Duckling says the gentromancy needs to go. Motivate them to cultivate a new generation of leadership. Well, that's the point. One of the podcasts I listened to, the Irrational Boomer podcast, had a guest on last week. Hang on. And said, this guest said, these Congress people should retire now and be incentivized to retire and mentor the upcoming people. But they don't do that. It's suddenly when they're out, they're gone, and they don't mentor anybody. And they hang on till their dying days. When I'm 91 years old, I don't want to be continuing to work. I would much rather have been retired. If I get to 91 and I'm still working, I hope somebody talks some sense into me. Jules says Congress needs to do something. I mean, anything about Melania threatening to buy Congress seats. Are you talking about Elon saying he's going to primary out anybody who votes against Trump's cabinet picks, stuff like that? Yeah, Fugly Duckling says, yep, they just hold on to power and money propped up by their people, like Feinstein. Feinstein's a great example. They are... She was 91, I think, when she passed. Died. I don't think she died in Congress itself, but she was still a senator, and she was in such a condition that her daughter had to go to court and get power of attorney to be able to pay her mom's bills and handle her money because her mom wasn't cognitive enough to handle her own finances. How can somebody be deemed not cognitive enough by a court to not handle their own finances and have somebody else granted power of attorney and then still be said, well, yeah, no, you're fine to go make law? They passed these laws. In the case of Dianne Feinstein, she died in office. She didn't make it to the end of her term. All the laws in her final term that she passed, for the most part, she didn't live long enough to see them do anything. That's ridiculous. Bass player says, what do you think? Are we a true democracy because of the popular vote versus electoral college? We are a representative democracy. If we were a true democracy, we wouldn't have a Congress, we wouldn't have a president, and every time we needed to vote on, anytime anything came up, there would be a national vote on every topic, popular vote across all 50 states. We are a representative democracy where we vote in people to vote on our behalf at the national level. Now, the argument could be made about getting rid of the Electoral College. It needs, if it were to go, it would need to be a constitutional amendment. That's the only way to get rid of it because it is specifically in the Constitution. And I know there's an interstate electoral popular vote compact they're working on where a bunch of states have agreed to work together to get rid of the Electoral College, and said, hey, what we'll do is once we get to 270 electoral votes in this compact, then we all agree that whoever wins the nationwide popular vote gets our state's electoral votes, regardless of how our state specifically voted. They don't have enough votes yet. They're going to try to do it. However, it will be challenged in court because there are two parts of the Constitution that disagree with each other. There's one part that says Congress must approve any interstate compact like that, and another part that says each state gets to decide its own elections and how they run their elections. So it would end up before the Supreme Court, and that would be anybody's guess as to how that turns out. How did we go from hope and change with Obama to Donald Trump? Simple. One, Democrats pushed Hillary Clinton. She was unlikable. I think she was always unelectable. She ran a horrible campaign, didn't really visit the swing states, and they treated her like it was a foregone conclusion that she was going to win. Because in a realistic world, there was no reason why she should have lost. And they didn't take Donald Trump seriously at all. They treated him like the joke that he is. He fell ass backwards into the presidency. The Republicans didn't treat him like a serious threat when he was in the primary. I don't think he ever intended to win the presidency the first time. I think he intended to run. He wanted to raise a whole shit ton of money and then turn around and, I think somebody said, hey, you'll just run, you'll do this for a few months, you'll make a bunch of money in donations, you'll get beat, and then you can complain about getting beat or whatever, and after a while you get to claim all that money. I think that was his goal. Well, then the primary field for Republicans was spread so thin, where he was getting 35 to 40% of the vote, in some cases, sometimes less. The other candidates spread the difference between them all. And then by the time they realized they had to coalesce around one person to beat Trump, it was too late. They just didn't have enough time left to get enough delegates to beat Trump. On the other side, you had Hillary being pushed by the Democrats as a foregone conclusion. She ran a horrible campaign. And then you left Bernie Sanders sitting there, who didn't help matters by not dropping out of the primary earlier. He held on all the way to the convention and just pissed a lot of people off. And then you had a bunch of Bernie Sanders voters who turned around and were pissed at Hillary for how they treated Bernie because he didn't bow out gracefully. That turned around and voted for Trump. That's how we went from Obama to Trump. And it's not uncommon. Obama was hope, change. He was also a black man, obviously. And this country went from never electing a black man prior to electing him twice. Kind of a shift, kind of far right, okay? Then it would have to shift even farther, shifted left. It would take another shift left to vote in a woman. Well, then what happened is instead it turned out to be they swung back the other direction and we voted in an old white man. Shirley says, how could there be 70 million in the United States who are so stupid? Remember, Kamala only lost. Yeah. Comey didn't help matters in 2016. No, he didn't. Coming out. Why do this stupid thing? I really wish there was an option to turn off the invites. Nikki says Bernie voters voted for T again in 2024. Some of them probably did. There were some protest votes. They were mad at how Kamala became the nominee. They were mad at how Joe Biden was handled. They were mad about the economy, mad about the two wars going on that we're not part of, but we are funding because we're helping out allies. Some were protesting the fact that Kamala Harris spent the last 2-3 weeks campaigning with Liz Cheney. None of it helped. They did, even though Kamala Harris ran about a perfect campaign, there were a lot of complaints about how just everything went, and people protested for a multitude of reasons. And I will admit, some didn't vote for her because of the Democrats not getting the message out. One of the things you kept hearing from people on the right, well, there was never a primary. There was never a primary. There was a primary. Almost every state held a primary. There were 3 people initially, then it came down to 2. No, there were 4 in the Democratic primary. Dean Phillips out of Minnesota didn't do much. Marianne Williamson didn't do much. RFK Jr., who dropped out, ran as an independent. And hang on. Back. Yeah. And then Joe Biden. Now, when you vote for Joe Biden, knowing that he's 82 years old, you had to assume that if something happened to Joe Biden, Kamala Harris was going to be next in line. She was the VP. When he said he wasn't running again, she made the most sense to be the next thing. For all the people who are protesting about the primary, this or that, would you have said the same thing if Joe Biden had died? And if the answer is no, then your issue isn't that there was no primary. Your issue is clearly something else. Um, Bass player says, do you think Social Security will be targeted and there will be an uprising big enough to stop it? I think some of them will try. I don't think they have the votes in Congress to fuck with Social Security too much. Why? Because they have to get reelected. And the biggest, most reliable voting blocks for the Republican Party is boomers and anybody older than boomers. And almost everybody that is a baby boomer is on Social Security at this point. I think even the youngest boomers are now at an age where they can start drawing even partial Social Security. I just don't think they are going to have the willingness to gut it. They may fuck with it enough where there's like no cost of living raises for a while, something like that. But even that, I don't think they're going to mess with it too much because they have to get reelected. Peter says, not true, still working. And some of them still are. Yeah, you're right. Some of the boomers that are eligible are still working. I know several that are drawing money, part of Social Security. They're on partial Social Security while still making an income. Some of them have taken, opted to wait their full time and get their full benefit for the larger payout. But they're all in the age range that would be eligible, whether they're taking the benefit or not. I think that's what I was getting at, is they're in that age range, whether they're eligible or not, or drawing it or not. They're at the point when they could. Simple Life said, I never thought the will to overturn Roe v. Wade would be there, but here we are. Well, that's half the problem. You're right. But see, Democrats had multiple opportunities where they could have tried to codify Roe v. Wade. And they said the same thing. It's never going anywhere. They're not going to get it overturned. It's settled law. They would hold these confirmation hearings for Supreme Court justices. Well, what do you think about Roe v. Wade? No, it's settled law. It's done. It's settled. So they just assumed, there's no need to push. There's no rush. Well, what ended up happening, they got the right 3 judges in during the Trump administration, made it a 6-3 conservative majority. They got the right case, and they got it overturned. User credit card number's gone. He can go cry somewhere else, but that's something interesting. I see these comments pop up by Trumpers and MAGA all the time whenever we're talking about politics and what's going on and what's coming next. Always saying liberal tears, yet I never see the person they're talking about actually crying. Talking facts. We're not whining, we're not crying, we're not planning to overthrow the government. It's just projection from them because we're not acting the way they would. They were the ones crying for 4 years. He's not our president. President Trump. I don't even see the flag anymore. Come save us. We're not doing that. We're saying, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is what we can do to prevent it. Trumpers will have big tears when the next Democrat president wins. I agree. I've been saying, though, they need to run on a kind of New Deal style mentality. Fugly Duckling says, good night. This is a good live. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you. And since I know you're new here, I throw this out at the end of my lives, but I'll say it now too. I do record all my lives. This will be up over on my YouTube page. Analytical Iowan on YouTube. There is a link in my bio. This will be up sometime late tonight, early tomorrow. So if you want to catch the rest of the live or any of them that you've missed, I post them all up over there. So just thought I'd throw that out there for you. Jules says those 3 judges admitted under oath in front of Congress that Roe v. Wade was settled law. Yeah, they did. They said that. They said it's settled. It's precedent. we wouldn't touch it. And then the first chance they got, they did. I remember the big Trumper tears from my community in 2020. Good times. I thought he was done. Yeah, I did too. And I really thought it was going to be done. Although this is the last gasp of MAGA, I just don't think the MAGA movement's going to survive outside of Trump. I think even Donald Trump has said that. He doesn't know how MAGA survives after this election run because he can't run again. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens there. But Republicans, if he crashes the economy as bad as it could be, he could lead to Democrats being in charge for like 20 years, much like what happened after Herbert Hoover wrecked the economy in 1929. Now, in 29, stock market crashed first, and then they responded to fix the economy that was already crashing with tariffs, which made it even worse. Now, we will see what happens here. The economy itself right now is pretty strong, but the tariffs are going to make the economy worse, especially as big as what they're talking. And it crashes the economy nearly as bad. They could be setting the Democrats up for a long run. But again, only if the Democrats do stuff and actually help people and get, beyond just getting things passed. The one thing I wish Democrats did more was crow about their accomplishments. They don't crow about their achievements nearly enough. Fugly Duckling says, I subscribe to Analytical Iowan on YouTube. Well, thank you. I do post all of my TikToks and my lives and some other videos over there. And that's where I'll still keep posting stuff if something happens and ends up, TikTok, it does end up going away. So I will be posting my stuff over. I'll keep making videos if something happens to TikTok. That's just where I'll be. Bass Player says, do you think Roe was not codified as a voting tool for Dems? No. I think it was actually them saying, well, they had a mistaken belief that it was safe, so they weren't worried about it. And Republicans, I don't think they wanted it. They actually wanted it overturned. They wanted it there to continue to run on overturning it because it was a great fundraiser for them. It was a great thing they could campaign on every time. Apple Bugnuts says, how come maggots don't understand tariffs? Democrats should have done a better job. The problem is they should have they were talking about it, but unfortunately Republican voters, specifically MAGA voters, give Donald Trump a lot more credit for being intelligent just because he was president. They think that gives him some kind of special knowledge that, well, clearly he served in the role for 4 years, so he must know something we just don't. Clearly we're uninformed because he was president. It's completely stupid, but that's how they think. Joe Biden's presidency gets compared to Carter, Wilson, and FDR. I hadn't heard the Wilson. Carter and FDR is interesting. I think Carter was a good president. Underrated. Probably should have gotten an extra term. And beyond that, as just a person, Carter was a great person. Wilson, I don't know why he's compared as much to Wilson. But then FDR, oh man. If he's getting compared to FDR, that's great. I keep saying we need an FDR type to run again, running on a New Deal style platform. And some people have said Joe Biden was that person. The problem is he didn't package it like a New Deal style program. Um, Something easy to digest. That's one of the reasons that Donald Trump appeals to MAGA. He talks at about a sixth grade level. Short, simple things that they can grasp on, even if they're incorrect. He talks to them in sound bites. Um, so I've been saying that's the kind of person we would need to run. I wish Joe Biden would have taken a page out of FDR's book and done the fireside chats, like a fireside podcast with President Biden, a weekly podcast where he sits down fireside like FDR did and just talks about the achievements and accomplishments of his presidency every week. That would have been a hit. Could you imagine? He would have been the perfect person with the kindly grandpa appearance to do something like this and reassure a scared nation. I think it would have worked great. Um, Joe Biden was basically Trump's cleanup guy after Trump threw all the toys on the ground. Yeah, that's typical Democrats. Republicans break it, Democrats fix it. Republicans convince everybody that the Democrats actually broke it and they need to come fix it, and then break it some more. That would have been great. Biden fireside. Yeah, that would have been. Um, just an idea I had well after the fact. I was on the Rational Boomer podcast one night, and we were just talking back and forth, and I threw out the idea of a New Deal type thing, and we were talking just like this about how Democrats don't do a good enough job crowing about their achievements, etc. And lo and behold, that's when I came up with the idea. I'm like, yeah, Biden should have been doing fireside chats and, talking weekly about all of the good things he did and bragging. Problem is, Biden's an old school politician who thinks his achievements should just talk for themselves. And the problem is, people aren't paying attention. They were listening to the guy who speaks long, loud, and doesn't actually say anything. But yeah, that would have been great. James T. said, has there been a tentative slate established for Dems 2028? No, not that I've heard. Currently, the front runner, based on polling, and if you follow me for any length of time, I don't trust polls, haven't been right since 2016, except for this year. Shows the front runner for 2028 being Kamala Harris. And apparently she's mulling over whether or not she's going to run in 28 again and actually see if having a primary works in her favor and if she would actually get through the primary herself. And she's also debating either that or running in 2026 for governor of California. If she runs for governor of California, then she is probably going to automatically be out in 2028 for the Democratic Party. Beyond that, Democrats have a long list. Josh Shapiro, maybe. J.B. Pritzker out of Illinois, maybe. Some people have suggested Tim Walz as a maybe. Andy Beshear out of Kentucky, maybe. Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom. Democrats have a long list. Republicans don't, because they don't have anybody who can capture that MAGA base. Keto Power says AOC. Yeah, AOC's got to be, I don't know how old she actually is, but I'm guessing because she's been in politics for a little bit, she's got to be close to 30 something, I think. So she's would probably be eligible by 28. That's just it. Democrats have a good chance here to run almost, like, they've got a lot of people they could run, and I really think they need to make the decision based off of kind of who's going to run for the Republicans. It won't matter as much if it's J.D. Vance, but if you're getting an older candidate running for the Republicans, I think Democrats need to run a young candidate. James says, don't you think someone else, not Kamala, would be voted in as the president delegate at the 2028 DNC? Well, it would depend. See, the DNC votes the way the state elections vote in the primary. So it would all depend how the primaries go. Nikki says, if T and Patel actually go after adversaries, is there anything or anyone who could stop it? The courts. The courts would have to be the ones to stop it when those cases get to court, because they would. Courts would have to be the one to stop it, because you still have your rights, and they would have to do. When they get there, they'd be dismissed almost immediately. They would have to get arrest warrants, things like that, and judges wouldn't sign off on the arrest warrants, wouldn't sign off on the search warrants, that kind of stuff. Doro says, do you think Biden should have stepped down and allowed Kamala to be president 6 months ago? I said that at the time. I said Joe Biden should finish the race as president. Said that for the 3 weeks that he was running, where the media kept saying, is he going to drop out? Is he going to drop out? Is he going to drop out? Is he dropping out? This Democrat says he should drop out. And doing nothing but dragging him through the mud. I said, if Joe Biden steps aside, it should be Kamala Harris, but he should finish the race. But if he steps aside and he's not fit to be the president because of his health, if that's what they're saying, then if he's not fit to be the president in 6 months, he should have also stepped aside from the presidency then and given her the presidency, because, I don't see much changing in 6 months' time. But, hindsight being what it is. I hope Harris runs as early as she can. She's learned a lot. Most qualified. She is. James says, do you think Kamala would be able to garner the same or more support for 2028? She is the most qualified person in a while to have ran for the presidency, outside of, I'd say, Joe Biden. She's worked in all three branches of government, and ultimately, whether or not she'd get more support. Maybe. She might actually garner more support. And I think some of the protest voting would be voting differently this time. The ones that voted against the wars, well, those won't be going on. The ones that were protesting Joe Biden's economy, we wouldn't be in Biden's economy anymore. We'd be in Trump's economy. The one saying there was no primary, well, there'd be a primary, and if she won that, they couldn't say that. It could be an entirely different ball game. So it's entirely possible. Let's see. Euro says, have a good evening. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining in. Not sure how much longer I'm going to be doing this, but thank you for stopping in. I do have a link in my bio to my YouTube page. All of my TikTok lives are up over there. This one will be up over there later on as well. So that's always an option if you wanted to catch the entirety of the live. Talking about Kamala says she knows the law and Constitution. She does. Like I said, she was one of the more qualified people to be running. So I think the only thing I kind of fault her for, and that's not even her so much as the advice she was probably given, is she spent too much time campaigning with Liz Cheney, trying to gather the disenfranchised Republican voters, and lost a bunch of far left people. James says, if Kamala didn't act so giddy and not laugh so much, I and many others would support her. That's just her natural personality. She's always in a good mood. I personally liked it. It was refreshing. From somebody like Donald Trump, who is supposedly joking 90% of the time when he says something egregious, and he just comes off like a moron, who doesn't seem to have a natural sense of humor or a decent personality. Eugene says, why doesn't seniority have a place when it comes to selecting important cabinet positions? In the Trump administration, it doesn't, because he wants loyalists. He only cares about loyalists and donors. That's how he was the last time he was around. And then, of course, for both parties, it's always you put in your people of your own party. That way you get, people with similar views as yours guiding the agencies that you're going to be given, credit for or the blame for, depending on how they go. Pamela says, Trumpet lied every time he spoke. Pretty much. The man has a very loose relationship with the truth. Now, I will say, I think, in a lot of times, he's not lying in his own mind, that he actually believes the stuff he is saying is true. I just think he's that dumb. But yeah. Now I kind of started out this live talking about the Equal Rights Amendment, and there's 100 plus Democratic lawmakers calling on Joe Biden to publish the Equal Rights Amendment. And this Equal Rights Amendment was passed in the 70s. Bass player says, other than Elon, do you think and or is there a puppeteer behind Trump? Not one specifically. I think the people around him all know how to deal with him. They pat him on the back, tell him he's a genius, and they can get him to believe almost anything. But you're even hearing that his own aides and stuff around him, in part because he's sundowning and he's having dementia issues, etc., that he... he's not telling anybody before he sends out a Truth Social post about his latest policy pick, his latest cabinet pick, or whatever. He's not consulting people anymore. So I don't think there's necessarily a puppeteer behind him, because he's not listening to anybody. He's doing whatever he wants, and now they have to reel him back in. James says Trump is a wannabe stand-up comedian that supplements with being a bully or ego. Yeah, that's about right. His version of jokes is bullying, bluster, or just saying something, and then when there's negative backlash, oh, I was just joking. The joking he's doing is trying to cover up his blatant stupidity. Pamela says seniors are going to be sorry they didn't vote for Kamala. Hope not. I really hope seniors aren't going to be sorry. I hope they're not able to do much to affect Social Security. I'm worried about it. But I keep saying that Congress has to get reelected. And it's going to take Congress to mess with Social Security. And they're just not going to have the stomach to mess with Social Security too much because it's going to affect a big chunk of their their voters base. So there's that. I really hope that I'm right there and that it doesn't come back to hurt our seniors. As far as Trump being great his first 4 years, no, he wasn't. He botched the pandemic response. In fact, what he did, he threw out the pandemic response book in 2016 or 2017, right after getting elected or inaugurated. He fired the pandemic response task force, the doctors that would have been responsible for dealing with the pandemic response, and said, yeah, we won't do that. We'll hire them when there's an issue. We'll hire the doctors then. I don't pay people to sit around. Their whole point of that whole group was to find events like COVID before they became big and stop it so it didn't become a thing. He told people to inject bleach. Yeah. Well, what he actually said, I will preface this. Effectively, what he said was, well, if bleach is working so well against this stuff, why don't we look into whether or not you can inject it intravenously or something along those lines. He did say look into it, but it's still dumb, and anybody with half a brain cell knows it's dumb. But that's the point. He's a dumb person. He is not intelligent in the least. A lot of Trumpers believe the pandemic was made to kick Trump out of office. Well, and I've been actually saying not exactly the opposite. But here's the thing. The pandemic hits. If he would have handled the pandemic responsibly in the way he should have and said, hey, look, folks, this is serious. We're going to do whatever we have to do. We're going to get through it. We're going to push through. We're going to mask up. We're going to shut the country down. We're going to do what we need to do for however long it takes to keep it from spreading and dealt it seriously, he would have gotten reelected walking away in a landslide. But his option was to ignore it. It's going to go away. It'll be gone when it warms up. It'll be gone by March. It'll be do this. It'll be that. Oh, maybe we should have less testing. If we have less testing, we'll have fewer cases. Yeah, you'll have fewer confirmed cases because you won't be sure that people have COVID. Being completely dumb. If he would have took it seriously, he would have gone down as probably a pretty damn good president, and he would have guaranteed himself a second term. VB Gladiator says he wouldn't allow people to wear COVID masks in the White House. Exactly. He wouldn't let them wear the masks. He didn't want to wear one himself. Hell, he exposed his Secret Service crew and his driver and everybody to COVID. When he was actually in the hospital with COVID, he made them put him in a car and drive him around a few blocks so he could wave at people, to prove he was still strong. Candy says VP Kamala Harris was the most qualified person to be president. She's very smart and intelligent. I couldn't agree more. Nikki says, still blows my mind that people politicized an illness that was global. Yeah. Yeah, they did. They politicized an illness in part because Trump completely mishandled it. If he would have handled it the way he should have and the way his advisors probably were trying to get him to deal with it, but he didn't want to listen to him because he knows more than everybody, it wouldn't have been politicized and he would have been considered a great president. But he's a joke and he's an idiot, but he's also an idiot who doesn't know he's an idiot. George W. Bush got reelected because of 9/11. That was in part of how he got reelected, was because of how they handled 9/11. Grounding the planes almost immediately. Once they realized it was a major issue, they grounded all American aircraft. And just the patriotism that sprung up because of 9/11 really helped George W. Bush get elected. And that's kind of what I was talking about with COVID. If Trump would have dealt with it in that same fashion, he would have gotten reelected walking away. Pamela said Trump was never great. He wasn't qualified to be in the White House. He only cares about himself. Oh, yeah. I couldn't stand him back then. I said I couldn't vote for somebody who comes in with a mindset of only I can fix it. I know more than everybody. And he never once changed that mindset. Nikki says, Giuliani was a big hero during 9/11. Oof. Lost his cool when he denied first responders benefits. Yeah. He was setting up at one point to be a really good presidential candidate because of his reaction to 9/11, and people loved Rudy at the time. Look at how far he has fallen. Pamela says wasn't qualified to be in the White House. I assume that's what you meant. Based on how you phrased everything else, I kind of assumed that's where you were going with that. All right. Well, I've been going almost 2 hours here. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Appreciate you all for joining me. It's been a great conversation. We got through it even without my moderator, TJ. He wasn't able to be here tonight. He was actually recording a guest appearance over on the Rational Boomer podcast. I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow's episode or not. But I recommend you check it out. There is a link to affiliated creators in my bio, which can get you to the Rational Boomer, or you can look up Rational Boomer here on TikTok, and he's got a link tree in his bio. That'll take you to all the places his podcast is. So you might want to give that a listen. He'll be up on there in the next day or two. I think it's tomorrow's podcast, but I'm not sure. And I'm going to be a guest over there another time here coming up. I'm waiting to hear back when we're going to do that. As always, I thank you guys for joining me. This will be up over on my YouTube page, Analytical Iowan on YouTube. I post all my lives over there. So anybody who can catch it, if they didn't catch the beginning, or if they want to hear it all, or just listen to it all again, I post it up so people can enjoy it. I thank you for joining me, and I will catch you the next time I go live. All right. Had a pretty good live. Did really, really well. And we made it through without TJ. So thank you for joining me, and I will talk to you again later.